Hi, you guys. This is the card we're going to make together today. This is one of 3 cards that I had made using the same stamp and the same inks and the same embossing powders, all with 3 different looks. So let's get started with this card. So I started by grabbing my Misty and the Gina K template, the Wreath Builder template. I cut a 4x4 piece of cardstock. It's in Starlight by Maker Forte. And then I used the Gina K Masking Magic and die cut it in a circle and masked it in the center there because I want to stamp around that. So I'm using this stamp set, which is the Modern Christmas Watercolor. It's a collaboration with Hedgehog Hollow, and those are the 2 stamps I'm going to use today for my wreath. And these are the inks that I'm going to be using. These are the inks that I use, the same 3 inks I used on all 3 of my cards. And they're by Catherine Pooler. And I love it because her inks stay wet longer, which will help me when I'm going to do my embossing. So I start by getting my first leaf and placing it where I want on here. And then once I have it set up, I will be able to grab it with my Misty and ink it up with those beautiful ink colors. And I'm going to start with my lightest ink color, green tea, and stamp that up. And then I'm going to be grabbing a second color, a deeper shade, eucalyptus. And I'm just going to tap that in a few spots just to add some variation in color. And then I'm ready to commit to stamping it onto my cardstock. And the Starlight cardstock is a beautiful shimmery cardstock that really is gorgeous against this. Isn't that pretty? So we're going to do that 3 more times. So I'm going to move my card, keeping it in that square so it's lined up. And then using the same inks, I'm going to stamp this again. And it's going to look great when it's done. So I'm using the same process that I used with the first stamp, and I'm doing it again. And I will do this 2 more times so that I have a wreath of leaves. And here it is finished. That's the first layer. Now we're going to get ready to do the second layer. This is the stamp we're going to use for the second layer. And you can see it's a big, big stamp taking up a lot of space. So I'm only going to need to stamp this one twice. So I'm lining it up, making sure it's in the spot that I want it in. And then I can grab it with my Misty. And this time I'm going to use Spruce, which is a dark, rich, beautiful evergreen kind of color. And I'm going to stamp that right over the other ones, over the other leaves. Beautiful. Those colors complement each other so nicely. Now I'm going to flip it completely around, put it back in that little template, and stamp the other side in the same way using the same color ink. And again, Gina K Designs sells those wreath building templates, and I love them. And there we have it. We have our layers finished. Now it's time to remove the mask and see the magic. So I'm using my little picker there because that ink is still wet over the mask and I don't want it smudging on my card. So I'm trying to be very careful. And there you have it. We have that center area, which is where our sentiment is going to go around our wreath. So now it's time to do the embossing, keeping in mind that that ink is still wet. So I'm going to use 3 different kinds of embossing powder. The first one is Metallic Platinum by Wow. And I'm just going to tap it very lightly in little spots on the card. I'm not trying to get perfect coverage. I want it to be a little sloppy and a little playful, I guess you could say, and organic. So now that I'm done with that one, it's time to pull out the second color that I'm going to use, which is called Crusty Copper. And that's a gorgeous, gorgeous metallic copper. So I'm going to go out a little bit further The ink is still wet enough that it will adhere to it. Catherine Pooler's inks are wonderful for that. And now make sure I put that away so I don't spill my embossing powder all over the table like I'm sure every one of us has done at some point. And now for the third color, which is Peridot. And this is beautiful Peridot. It's a lot more vibrant than the other two, and I think it complements the other two colors. So I'm just going to grab that a little bit, tap the excess off, make sure you get your excess off. And you notice this time that I did not use an embossing buddy because it didn't matter where I got the embossing powder. I wanted it to have that kind of look. And now I'm using my handy dandy rainbow powder polish and cleanup brush from Maker Forte. And you will see that I have a lot of fun with that brush. First of all, look at the beautiful colors, and it's also good to get a lot of stuff off. So now I'm going to go ahead and heat emboss everything and get that shine going. The magic of heat embossing, right? And here we are, we're finished heat embossing. Isn't that beautiful? Look at the shine and the variation and depth of color. And this is all one layer. Beautiful. So you can see I'm having fun with that brush. Maker Forte sells that brush. So now I'm going to go back in and add a little bit more color using the lightest shade. And I'm just making sure that my little brush is not doesn't have other colors of ink on it, because at times I've inked up and just ended up with mud because I didn't clean my brush prior to adding my ink. So I'm just doing a very light coat just to add a little more color around the edges of the card and a little more interest so that everything blends a little bit better. Using a light touch, I really am not trying to do too much blending here. And that's it. And you can see it's very subtle, but you can definitely see a little more color on there. So now it's time to focus on our sentiment. And I am using the Bold Holiday Sentiments. That is a collaboration with Hedgehog Hollow and Maker Forte. And I've chosen to use the Merry and Bright sentiment. And I die cut a circle using the Starlight paper from Maker Forte. And now there's my embossing buddy, because this time I don't want to get embossing powder where I don't want it. And I think I used too much. And so I'm going to use this color hue, this color Hive from Maker Forte. It's an embossing paste. It's similar to Wow embossing paste, and it's incredible, guys. It works so well. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment on there with my embossing paste. Sorry, my head's in the way, but I wanted to make sure it was lined up. And once that's done, now I can come back in and add my embossing powder. And the embossing powder I'm going to use is called Chocolate Caramel Pearl by Wow, and it's gorgeous. Wait till you see it. Look at how beautiful that is. You can see a little bit of red in there, like a rustic red. Perfect for a holiday card. And so now I can go ahead and heat emboss that sentiment, and then I'm going to add it to my card in the center. And there it is. And I've popped it up on some foam tape to give it some dimension. And now I'm going to adhere it to my card base. And I use liquid glue because I find that I am always bad about lining up my cards. I admire any of you guys that can line up a card using permanent adhesive. I never get it right. So liquid glue gives me a little bit of wiggle room to be able to line my layers up. So now that I have my backdrop, my black backdrop, I'm going to adhere it to a 4¼ by 4¼ inch cream colored card base. So this is going to be a square card. And you can see that that little bit of black peeking around the edges of the focal point really helped that focal point to pop off the card. Now I'm going to add my sequins using my Rainbow Craft Pick and Gem Picker. And this is by maker Forte. You have a sharp side and you have a rubbery side. And also, most important, it's a rainbow. It's the most beautiful gem picker I've ever seen. So I'm going to pick a couple of sequins that look like berries and place them on my card. And I use the rule of thirds because I do like to do things in odd numbers. And then once I have that set up, I'm going to use my gem picker, the rubber side, and then I'm going to use my glue to adhere it. And I tend to use glossy accents because that dries matte and then you don't see if you use too much glue. Look at how easily I was able to pick up those embellishments, guys. I have never found a gem picker that works as well as this one. This one is going to be a keeper. Plus, it's rainbow. I mean, have you ever seen such a beautiful gem picker? So now that that's done, my card is finished. How easy was that? Now I'm going to show you two other cards that I made using the same stamp and the same ink. This was the wreath that was in that stamp set, and I used the same inks and the same embossing powders, stamping it several times to get that look, and Nuvo drops for the berries. And then, of course, I had to do a slim line. And everything is the same on the slim line. I just position them a little bit differently so it looks like more of a centerpiece. And that's it, guys. That's all there was to this. Thank you so much for stopping by.